Have you ever felt that today's world events mysteriously align with the prophecies of the New Testament? Wars, climate disasters, pandemics, and growing moral confusion lead many to ask, are we living in the last days? This question, which intrigues millions of people around the world, finds profound answers in the words of Jesus and the letters of the apostles. Today, we will dive into a reflection that bridges ancient and modern times, seeking to understand what today's signs reveal to us. The disciples' question. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24, Jesus sits on the Mount of Olives with his disciples. Curious about the future, they ask him, "Tell us, when will these things happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" This question wasn't merely about future events, but a search for understanding in a world full of uncertainties, much like we live in today. Jesus responds with a list of signs: false prophets, wars, rumors of wars, famine, plagues, and earthquakes. He warns that these events would only be the beginning of birth pains, Matthew 24 verse 8. Despite this, he also makes it clear that his followers should not live in fear, but with vigilance and hope. Parallels with the modern world. Fast forward to today, we see a society marked by uncertainties. The COVID-19 pandemic shook the world, claiming lives, straining healthcare systems, and causing economic crises. At the same time, natural disasters seem more frequent and intense. Devastating floods, uncontrollable wildfires, and earthquakes in unexpected places. These events echo the signs Jesus mentioned. But what about wars? International conflicts and tensions between world powers have escalated. News constantly reports mass displacements of refugees, nations in collapse, and internal political divisions. Just as Paul described in 2 Timothy 3 verses 1-5, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy. Moral corruption has also become evident. Ideologies rejecting biblical values are gaining strength, and many turn away from faith in exchange for fleeting pleasures. These signs aren't random. They reflect humanity's fall, something the Apostle Paul described with precision. John, a modern disciple. Imagine a young man named John living in today's world. He is a Christian, and like many of us, he is confused about what's happening globally. When the pandemic began, John lost a close relative. Soon after, a devastating earthquake struck a nearby city, destroying homes and leaving hundreds homeless. He wonders, does all of this have a greater meaning? Is God trying to tell us something? Seeking answers, John begins studying the New Testament. He reads about the signs of the end times and realizes that many of the events described seem to be unfolding before his eyes. However, one question remains: how should he act amidst all this? The words of Jesus. John finds comfort in the words of Matthew 24 verse 13, "But the one who stands firm to the end will be saved." He understands that, more than observing the signs, the focus should be on living Jesus' message, loving God above all and loving others as oneself. John decides to put his faith into action, helping the needy and sharing the hope of the gospel on his social media. This decision transforms his life. He realizes that even in times of tribulation, Christ's promise is greater than any difficulty. In this world, you will have trouble. But take heart. I have overcome the world. John 16 verse 33 echoes in his heart as a constant reminder. The hope of the New Testament. The prophecies of the New Testament are not meant to spread fear, but to prepare hearts. They call us to vigilance and repentance, reminding us that God is in control even when the world seems in chaos. In his letter to the Romans, Paul writes, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Romans 8 verse 28. This truth encourages us to live purposefully, knowing that even in the darkest times, a divine plan is unfolding. What about you? Amid so many challenges, how have you been responding? Are today's events merely coincidences, or is God inviting us to reflect and draw closer to him? Like John, We can choose to live with purpose, spreading hope and love in a world desperate for direction. Remember, the signs of the end times are not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new era where Christ will reign with justice. Until then, we are called to be light and salt, to make a difference, and to live with faith. The events we experience today may seem frightening, but the New Testament reminds us that there is hope amidst tribulations. No matter how difficult the path, Jesus promised that we would never be alone. If you want to continue exploring how the Bible can provide answers to today's dilemmas, subscribe to the Biblical Tales and Prayers channel. Share this video with your friends and leave your comment below. Together, we can better understand God's plans and strengthen our faith in uncertain times.